If you have a story you'd like to hear featured on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. And of course, thank you. I often go camping and hiking on my own as a way to decompress from everyday life and enjoy the gift that is nature. After sleeping under the stars, I always felt rejuvenated and ready to take on the world again. But after this specific trip, I did not come back with that same energized feeling, and I will never forget it. I was taking a trip through a remote forest in northern Michigan. It's not the first time I've been in this particular set of woods, so I had an idea of where I was at and where I wanted to stay. I set off with my always well-prepared pack and scouted out where I wanted to stay for the night. The first few days and nights even went exactly as I wanted. I hiked the trail, spent time in the small creek, watched frogs and other creatures in the water and birds in the trees. It was absolutely rejuvenating. But it was the third night where things took a turn. The sky was starting to darken unexpectedly, so I was anticipating rain. I reluctantly set up my tent to sleep in for the night, not wanting to be potentially soaked by morning. I settled into my tent for the night and listened to the sounds of wildlife to lull me to sleep. I was starting to doze off, right in the in-between state of awake and asleep, when I had noticed something, or rather, the lack of something. The sounds I was listening to were now gone. The cricket chirping was gone, the owls silent. Even the slight swaying sound of the tree branches from the wind seemed to have lost their voice. I held my breath to see if maybe I was mistaken, but I quickly picked up on a prickling sensation creeping up my spine. Something now felt off. Again, this wasn't my first time camping in these woods, so I assumed it was wildlife. Something was nearby and probably spotted my tent or even picked up on my scent and became curious. I can usually just let it pass and be fine, but this feeling was giving me predator vibes. I decided to look out my tent to see if I could figure out what it was and if I needed to try and scare it away or run away myself. I unzipped part of my tent and scanned the tree line. It didn't take long for me to spot a dark shadow that, if I'm being honest, seemed to shift and writhe in ways that defied logic. But then I noticed what I believed to be eyes. They were huge and had almost a red hue to them. But the height of those eyes was even more alarming. Even from a distance, the eyes reached the lower branches of the trees. That's when I started hearing a low rumbling sound, almost like a growling. But I could feel it in my feet where I stood. For once, since I've started going on these trips, I was frozen, not knowing what to do. I didn't have a car, so I had no chance of running or driving away. I just slowly zipped back up my tent, lied down, and listened, praying that whatever it was would lose interest in me and walk off. Of course, I couldn't get that lucky. Shortly after, I could hear the crunching of leaves and sticks, as if someone or something was walking on them. The sound was getting closer and closer to my tent, and I tried my best to control my breathing and remain calm. As I continued to listen, I could hear the creature's massive breathing. It sounded similar to a dog sniffing around, but put through an amplifier. As I got louder and closer to my tent, I could sense its presence. With the moonlight against my tent, I could make out a silhouette of the creature that was now too close for comfort. It was just as enormous as I thought. It had to be 8 or 9 feet tall. The shape was bizarrely unnatural. It had a mix of human and animal features. It was walking on all 4, but then stood on 2 as it pressed its face against my tent. That's how I could tell not only its height, but the fact that it had a snout. The spine also seemed to have a sharp curve to it, like it had a hunched back or how a cat looks when it's frightened. But the stench was honestly what nearly got me in trouble. It was a stomach-churning mix of rotting meat, wet dog, and something chemical. I couldn't really tell what though. I tried to remain calm, but the smell was making me sick. I was holding back from gagging, hoping the creature would pass soon and not realize there was someone in the tent. But I couldn't hold back anymore. The stench was unbearable, and I dry heaved. That's when the creature let out another growl, but it seemed to carry a hint of almost a human-like vocalization. It was like it was trying to speak, but couldn't form the words. The sound was just uncanny and just made the whole situation that much more terrifying. That this weird beast creature was trying to talk to me. But after it tried to speak, I could hear it walking away from the direction that it came from. I continued to lie there, too afraid to move. But once the stench was completely gone, and I couldn't hear the growling or walking, I mustered the courage to look out my tent again. It was definitely gone, but it was also still incredibly silent. I went back into my camp, took out my little hatchet from my bag, and lied still, waiting to fall asleep. I figured it was safer for me to try to stay put for the night and leave the next morning, rather than try to take down my tent and walk through the dark trees. By morning, I awoke to birds chirping and even a few nearby frogs, so whatever came by that night must be long gone. I got out of my tent, hatchet still in hand, and walked around the area. I wanted to look for tracks, and it certainly didn't take me long. It seemed like it rained a little, but not much. My tent wasn't even wet anymore. But on the ground near my tent, I could see the prints. They looked like massive canine-like prints, easily twice the size of a wolf's. I followed them where they stopped at my tent, faced towards it, then followed the prints back away from my tent and into the trees, where the prints were lost in the leaves and grass. But back in those trees, I saw something that added to my fear. There was a spot in the ground where the grass and leaves were flattened. Something was obviously lying there. Was that creature watching me? And was it watching after it left? Or before? The thought of being watched like prey made me even more uncomfortable. Something was not right about this, and this was no longer a fun, get lost in nature sort of trip, so I packed up and left. Since then, I've researched known animals in the area, trying to convince myself it was just an abnormally large wolf, but I can't get past the part where it stood on its back leg. This wasn't a quick up like some house dogs do. It stood as if it was a natural position for it. Not to mention, it walked like that. But as silly as this is going to sound, the only thing that keeps coming back around is that I may have witnessed the dog man. I didn't pay much attention to cryptids and things of the sort prior, but I mean, it could just be some kind of deformed creature, or maybe something we haven't quite identified yet. It's entirely possible. I've told a few friends about my sightings before, and they were absolutely intrigued. We've gone camping in the same area before, hoping to spot it, but so far, it has yet to come back. Or at least, it hasn't made itself known. Who knows? Maybe it just watched us in the distance without us having the slightest idea. Maybe it's waiting for us to trail off alone before it will finally come out of hiding. I recently listened to one of your older videos about cryptids, and I felt compelled to share an experience my friends and I had when we went camping. This took place back in 2017. 4 of my friends and I went camping in a spot up in the mountains. It was one of our favorite places because it was so secluded and away from people, away from the city, and all the lights that it brought. I loved seeing the stars at night between the tall trees so much that I often slept in the bed of my truck. No topper, no tent, just the bed, my sleeping bag, and that was it. We planned on being up there for a few nights. The day we arrived, we set up and had a great night. But the following evening, the atmosphere seemed to shift. The air became really still, but it was different from the stillness before a storm. It's hard to explain. Even the wildlife seemed to stop existing. My friend feared there may have been a mountain lion in the area and wanted to pack it in. Unfortunately, the rest of us weren't ready to call it quits. I gave her the keys to stay in my truck and joked that she could get away if she was right. Everyone else settled in for the night, and I slept in the bed of my truck again. But while I laid there trying to fall asleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I would look into my truck and see Janet passed out. I looked over to all the tents and my friends were nowhere to be seen, so they must have been in their tents. I scanned the trees in the area and didn't see anything or anyone. I finally told myself that I must have gotten myself worked up because of the air and my friend being worried. So I just told myself to calm down and finally fell asleep. The next morning seemed to be back to normal, so we all chalked it up to something being in the area. We were intruding on their habitat, so it was possible, but continued to have a great day. It was once again the following night when things got a bit scary. We had been sitting around the fire, talking and having a good time, when once again, the air seemed to be completely still. No crickets chirping, no owls hooting. There was nothing. Nothing except a pretty pungent smell. That's when we noticed how still and quiet it was. We sat there in silence, looking around, trying to see if we could find the source of the smell or why the forest went silent, when my friend pointed out something in the trees in the distance. He said he saw a tall figure dart across them. Jake, being who he was, wanted to go check it out. I can't blame him, as I'm the same way. But I'm a small girl, so I probably wouldn't have gone if I was alone. The other 3 stayed by the fire while Jake and I approached the trees. We didn't go far. There was a path that separated our campgrounds from the trees on the other side, but as we crossed the path, we started hearing a low, guttural growl. It stopped us from going forward, not wanting to be mauled by whatever it was. We still wanted to know what it was, though. Did we stand a chance, or would we be better off moving on or leaving? So we started shining our flashlights through the trees to find the culprit. To this day, I wish we would have just ignored it or packed up and left. We spotted something rocking side to side between trees. It stood about 6 feet tall and stood hunched over. Its skin, if you could call it that, was a shade of gray, tightly clinging to the bones. It had small tufts of hair in random spots all over. Altogether, it just looked beyond emaciated. But the more we looked at it, the more we couldn't look away. The growling was definitely coming from whatever that thing was, but where its face should have been, it wasn't. I was following the shape of the creature with my flashlight, but I could not find eyes or a mouth anywhere on what I assumed to be the head. It made no sense. While we continued to take in the sight of this thing, it raised one arm or leg, whatever it was, as it twitched, and it let out another loud growl. Except this time, it sounded like someone trying to scream with their mouth covered. Whatever it wasn't human, but I couldn't identify it either. All I knew was the sheer terror it instilled in me, and I yanked on Jake's arm to get the hell out of there. Thankfully, he didn't resist, and we went back to the camp where the rest of them asked what the hell was that and was freaking out as well. I was right there with them. None of us felt comfortable staying there, so we haphazardly broke down our tents and threw everything in my truck, or Caleb's. We drove back down to the entrance, and with us all being too tired and scared, we slept in the trucks in the parking lot when we could finally fall asleep. The next morning, we decided to check out the area before we left, feeling a little safer in the daylight. When we got up there, our campground looked picked over. The food items we left behind were shredded and eaten. The ground had been scratched at, as you could see the wide rake marks through the gravel, as well as spots that looked to be dug out in the dirt. You could see the large individual marks, like it was done with a rake or large claws. We cautiously approached the spot where we saw the creature that night. There was a small pile of something by the tree, and I say something because it looked like something that was regurgitated that included a small carcass in it. I couldn't stay long as it was making me sick, so I had to walk away. We went and told one of the rangers about a possibly sick animal up there that was potentially hostile, but he didn't seem to care much. He said he would look into it, and that was it. Given his demeanor, I didn't think he would care about our description of the creature or even believe us, so we just left it at that. We didn't camp there again until the next year in the spring, instead of the summer. I was hoping that either that thing we saw was dead, or maybe a different season would cause it to not be around. Thankfully, whatever the case was, we didn't see it. Part of me wishes I would, so I could try to get pictures, but part of me also thinks we got lucky getting out of there in one piece. I have a strange story that may be uneventful to some, but was seriously weird and bizarre at the time. This was in the 80s, so I have no evidence or proof of it happening, no photos or news articles or anything. It's just a story that I can tell, and all I can do is say that it's true and that it happened. When I was young, I used to love going camping in the summer with my dad, uncle, and cousins. I was the only boy that my parents had, but my uncle had 3 boys, so we're all kind of close to my age, so we all went as a group. so 6 people total. I won't get into their names because it's not important. I'll just refer to them as my cousins. We had always gone camping at the same place. I don't remember where exactly it was. It's been a long time, but it was a campground that was on this massive lake, and it always took us an hour or so to get there when we would go. We would spend about a week out in the woods, going fishing, swimming, and just doing whatever we wanted within reason. This was my 3rd year going with them, so I would have been around 10 at the time. We got there, got set up, and the first night and even the next day were uneventful. The 3rd day is when things got weird, or at least started to. We had all woken up with the same thought. It was time to go swimming in the lake. My dad hated going in the water, but my uncle didn't mind, so my dad was going to be fishing a bit down the shore, and the 5 of us would be in the water. We all got our stuff together and started to head down to the part of the shore where it was most shallow and easiest to swim in. But when we got there, we all kind of paused. There, near the shore, were several dead and completely destroyed fish corpses. It looked like something or someone had taken a bite out of them, and the remainder had floated off to shore. But it wasn't just 1 or 2. It was a solid dozen. It was gross and really hurt the vibe for me. I decided I would just go over and go fishing with my dad because I didn't want to be near dead fish parts. So I was sitting over by my dad, my cousins were swimming, and my uncle was watching from a chair on the shore when my youngest cousin made a comment about the other 2 touching his leg. They said that they hadn't, that they weren't even close enough to do so, and the younger one kept complaining that something was rubbing against his leg. My older cousin stepped over to him to see what was going on when he grabbed my younger cousin and told the other one to get out of the water, then ran to the shore. My uncle stood up and asked what was happening. I was watching them, and my dad was just as confused. We walked over to them to see what was up when my older cousin started explaining what he saw. He claimed that when he stepped over to my little cousin, he saw what was brushing against him, and it wasn't like anything he'd ever seen prior. The way he described it was like an eel. It wasn't a fish, it was long, had a very pronounced mouth, and was slithering like a snake. So, again, like an eel. The thing was that he said this eel was at least 8 feet long. Obviously, I don't know if he was mistaken or exaggerating, but I have to imagine that even if he was mistaken, as a scared child, that he couldn't be too far off the mark. My uncle told him to stop messing around, that there weren't any eels in the water, and especially not ones that large. But it was actually my dad that cut him off. He had grabbed what I now know to be his polarized sunglasses from his fishing vest pocket and put them on, and was watching the water surface intently. I remember the tremble in his voice because it was the only time I had ever heard him scared at that point in my life. He said, Ron, I don't think he's lying," and handed him the glasses, then pointed in the direction of where my cousins were. My uncle's mouth fell open as he watched. They both said that they saw the eel thing that my cousin had mentioned and that it was slithering around where they were, and then it went into the deeper water further off. Obviously, they were in awe. They had never seen anything like this. And even now, I've never known of a freshwater eel to get that large, and we'd never seen eels in that water. We ended up taking our stuff back to the campsite, and my uncle went and reported that there was a very large, possibly non-native creature in the water. The forest worker said that they would go and check it out, see if they could find it, but obviously, I have no idea if they ever did find it. We didn't go back in the water on that camping trip. We fished on the other end of the lake, but not at that shore. I know a lot of people may say, "Oh, an eel, so scary." But it wasn't that it was an eel. It's that it was this giant eel that was, for whatever reason, very active near the shore and was clearly hungry. It's also the thought that it kept swimming around and rubbing against my little cousin that's scary to me. Like, was it trying to determine if it could tear into him next? Was it measuring him up and trying to see if it was capable of tearing some of his flesh off? Also, I know we have freshwater eels in the US, but this thing was, based on the description given, way larger than they get. I've read that they can get around 4 feet, but the adults and my cousin have stated that this thing was minimum 8 foot and was very thick around, not slender like normal eels. To me, this was a terrifying event because it was so strange. I've heard a lot of cryptid stories out there, but never anything about large water creatures like this. Though maybe this was just a natural thing and not a cryptid per se, but it was cryptid parallel, a strange and possibly unidentified creature. Either way, it was scary, and the next time we went camping, we actually went to a different campground and stuck with that one until we were all just sort of done with camping trips. Back in 2016, one of my best friends was getting married, and she wanted me to be her maid of honor. I was ecstatic for them, as her girlfriend was a sweetheart, and if there ever was a couple that was meant for each other, it was them. There was no way I was going to miss it, so I made plans to drive out there. They moved to Michigan, and I was living in Wisconsin. They had already got themselves a nice little house, so thankfully, I was invited to stay with them, which also meant I didn't have to leave my little pup Lenny at home. He was a shelter rescue that my mom had been fostering, and I fell in love with him. I was working on training him, so I didn't want to leave him with my mom or anything and lose that progress. I couldn't afford to take the boat across the lake, so I was planning on driving around it, which meant about 7 to 8 hours on the road. That wasn't a big deal though, as I was a grade school teacher and we were on summer break, so I had no time restraints either. So, I packed up my things and headed out, excited for a great week. I was actually looking forward to sightseeing, and since I had left ahead of schedule, I was able to make my own stops along the way. I may have also gotten carried away and lost track of time too, as it started getting late. I made sure to have extra money so I could stay at a hotel, either on my way there or home. I thought I would drive as much as my eyes could stand. That way I had less to drive the next morning and more time to explore. I was planning on going another hour or so, but Lenny had started whimpering. He was still young, so I knew I was going to have to pull over as soon as possible. The road was pretty empty where I was, and maybe it was because it was late, so I stopped on a shoulder that had some trees and grass on the other side of the guardrail. I carried Lenny over the side and stood next to him, stretching some while holding on to the leash. I suddenly started getting this weird feeling, like I wasn't alone, like I was being watched. It was odd because I was on the side of this random highway with no one else around. I looked around the trees though, thinking maybe there was a deer or other wildlife in the area that I was honing in on, but I couldn't see anything. Then I noticed that Lenny seemed to be doing the same thing. I watched as he scanned the field in front of us and did a double take in the direction of one cluster of trees. I tried focusing as much as possible to see if I could see something, when all of a sudden, I saw a small figure run between two trees. It startled me, so I gasped a little and immediately looked down at Lenny. He kept turning his head to the side and whimpering. I was not comfortable with the situation, especially since Lenny confirmed something was there, so I snatched him up and rushed back to my car and drove off. Lenny sat up, looking out the window, going back and forth from the front to the back like he was trying to find something. It definitely was not making me feel any better, so I wanted to keep going until he stopped, thinking maybe if he couldn't sense it anymore, then I was safe to stop. When he finally gave up, I stopped at the next exit for a hotel. Unfortunately, I kept running into ones that had no vacancy, no pets allowed, and the one that did was way too expensive for me. So I decided to find a well-lit parking lot and just sleep in my car. I found a grocery store that was closed but had lights in the parking lot, so I parked in the furthest one in the back, took Lenny out one more time, then positioned myself to sleep for the night. The next morning, I started waking up and was still in that half-asleep, half-awake state. I could hear the nearby trees moving from the wind and other cars passing by, but was still trying to sleep while I could, since I wasn't hearing Lenny yet. But then, I started hearing what sounded like whispering. Again, feeling like I was still asleep, I thought I was dreaming. All I was seeing was darkness and hearing whispers. Some were louder than others, like they were closer, but all were incoherent. I couldn't make out any words or conversations being had until I heard, "Wake up," being clearly whispered in my ear. It was almost as if I could feel the air being pushed by my ear. Not only was this whispered, but it also felt like someone yanked on my arm. This made me jump up immediately to see that I was still in my car alone, besides Lenny, who was now wide awake, looking out my window behind me. I turned around to see no one or nothing there. I sat there for a minute, gathering my thoughts and catching my breath. The sun was just coming up because it was still a little dark, but there was no way I was going to be able to sleep anymore, so I set off. I found a McDonald's close by and stopped so we could both gather ourselves and get ready for the rest of the drive. Between the night before and my abrupt awakening, I was done with Michigan and ready to get to my destination. I made minimal stops on the way, and when I finally arrived, I teased them about Michigan being haunted and explained to them what had happened. They had no explanation at the time for the things in the trees, but they said the place that I stopped to sleep in was known as the dangerous part of the town. Lots of break-ins, robberies, and there was even one store that was set on fire due to disagreements between employees and management. So, they teased that it was probably a spirit protecting innocent people in the area and was trying to get me out of there. It was really weird, and that's just where I left it. I was indifferent when it came to the paranormal because I had never experienced anything, but I don't know how else to explain what happened. The wedding, the after party, all of it was a lot of fun, and very little went wrong or was stressful. It was a great time after that, but I made sure to leave early so I could get home the same day because I did not want any more run-ins with whatever was living out there. Now, the reason I was reminded of this was because I was watching a video on YouTube with different cryptids by state, seeing if there were any interesting ones on Wisconsin, when I learned about melon heads. They were apparently seen in a few different states, and one of those was Michigan. It was mentioned that they escaped the Felt Mansion as they were being tested on there, and now they live in the woods, attacking people. I wasn't far from where the mansion was, and all I could think about was the thing in the woods. Did I encounter a melon head by chance? It still doesn't explain the weird whispering. All I know, though, is that the next time we get together, they're either coming to me, or I'm saving up enough to take the boat across the lake. So that, my friends, was another, wow, train of thought gone. Cryptids. Collection of cryptid stories. My apologies. Sheesh. So there's that. Yeah, cryptid stories. We got them. Creepy. And sorry it's been a minute again. I feel like I just... things, people, stuff, work. Lot of work. Feel like that's just kind of last quarter. Things are getting kind of weird. And at the end of the day, I just get tired and not an excuse, but here I am. We're going to get through it. Things will get better. But anyways, here we are, October. Thought we'd do a little more creepier ones like cryptid. See what else we get going on this month for the remainder of it. But how have you all been? For those that I may not see on Saturdays, maybe Fridays over on Raven's channel, we stream on Saturdays, so if you're not there, you have nothing going on, you can pop over and say hi. But either way, just let me know how you've been doing. I should probably mention the other stuff that I usually mention. Like, if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, of course, with those comments, letting me know how you're doing. Do you have any plans for Halloween? Do you hand out candy? Do you go trick-or-treating? Do you go to a party or haunted house? Do you have any haunted houses in your area that are worth going to, at least? It's not something I've looked into yet for Minnesota. I'll have to look that up. Yeah. So with that being said, friends, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a fantastic rest of your week. And until next time, take care.